bombshell in the John Gotti Jr. case today. Court TV's Lisa Bloom has been in and out of the courtroom during the trial, and with her a very special guest. Gotti's attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, joins her for his first TV interview. All right, Lisa, I think you've got some questions you would like to ask Jeff?
Oh, I sure do. Thanks so much, Catherine. Well, a mistrial today as to John Gotti Jr. and an acquittal on one of the charges. Jeffrey Lichtman is sitting down with us. It's his first sit-down TV interview since the outcome today. Welcome, Jeffrey. What happened? Explain this to our viewers.
Well, the jury acquitted on a $25 million securities fraud. They were hung on certain other charges, and they could not find a single racketeering act against John. He was basically clean across the board. The other two defendants were convicted of various charges. John will be out next week on bail as per the judge's order today.
You know, Jeffrey, you are going to be a household name after this case and after your work in this case. I was in the trial for parts of it as much as I could. I saw your work in this trial. And this was the real thing, and I've got to give you all of the credit for the outcome in this case. I think really the deck was stacked against you. Most people looking at this case at the beginning said there was no way there was going to be any kind of a favorable outcome. Defense attorneys certainly think a mistrial is a good outcome. It's almost a win for the client. You got to win on one charge. How on earth did you do it?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind that there were 3 conspiracies to murder a week before the trial started that were dropped. So not only did we win the $25 million securities fraud, we also got rid of the 3 most serious charges in the case. How did we do it? Frankly, working 7 days a week, 16, 17 hours a day, there was not a single stone that was left unturned. I did everything and anything within my power to destroy these witnesses, and I can tell you that every single cooperating witness that hit the stand was obliterated, including Curtis Sliwa, the civilian witness, who probably was the worst witness of all.
Well, and let's talk about Curtis Sliwa and that withering cross-examination you did of Curtis. You even did a little behind-the-scenes maneuvering to get some information to use against him. What did you do?
Well, he speaks for money. He gives speeches and gets paid, and I inquired into his booker. I posed as a regular citizen and asked him to speak at a function and received the quoted fee of $25,000 for his 50-minute speech. While on the stand, I asked him how much he gets paid for a speech. He said he rarely does it, even though the booker had written back to me that he does it once a week. He told me $1,000 on the stand. I laughed in his face. He then went to $2,500, then $5,000, then $10,000, and then I took out the email from his booker that said $25,000, and he finally admitted that. I mean, he was really just about the worst witness I've ever seen. The man was born to lie, and I kicked his butt all over the place.
All right, well, he's not here to defend himself. I do want to say that Curtis Sliwa says that he's looking forward to round 2. I understand the prosecutors are going to retry this.
You know what? Whether they retry it or not, it'll be a long time. I thank God for Curtis Sliwa, because if not for his embarrassing performance in the case, I don't know if I'd be here yucking it up with you right now.
Well, let's talk about the split on the mistrial, and this is new information, by the way, that Jeffrey has just obtained. You're going to hear it here first. Tell us what the breakdown was on each of the charges.
Well, on the Sliwa kidnapping, it was 7 to 5. On the extortion and loan sharking, it was 11 to 1 for conviction, and the breakdown was about that. This case could have gone either way. Obviously, we convinced a handful of jurors on various charges not to convict. It's very hard to get through a case like this if you're a regular juror with the name Gotti flashed in front of you. I mean, nobody could possibly believe that a jury could acquit a Gotti or not find him guilty. That's what we had to deal with. It was almost impossible to get a jury that would even sit in this case.
Yeah, and I know that during jury selection, they all said that they were afraid. They were afraid of the Gotti name, afraid to be on the case.
150 of them, of the 300 in the pool, so they were terrified and they were ready to convict, or they didn't want to be on the panel. I mean, we came into this case with 2 strikes against us, with our hands tied behind our back, and just by sheer perseverance, hard work, luck, we had an incredibly fair judge. You know, we got the chance to sit here with you. Otherwise, I'd be at home licking my wounds.
Well, Jeffrey, tomorrow we're going to have Curtis Sliwa on, so I'm going to play a few of these sound bites for Curtis and get him wound up about this. But let me ask you about the split. You just described 7-5 and 11-1. Prosecutor would obviously be a bit encouraged by this, and I understand that what they were really hung up on is whether or not your client had withdrawn from the mob, which doesn't really have anything to do with what Curtis Sliwa has to say, but much more a lot of the sort of turncoats that testified. Given that split, you're confident about a retrial?
You know, first First of all, I joke about Curtis Sliwa, but he was actually a very small part of this case. He was just a victim. He could never pick out any of the shooters. It was the turncoat testimony that made or broke this case. The government had the opportunity, while we had the hung jury, while they were still impaneled, to push them towards a verdict, as opposed to the mistrial on certain of the charges. Keep in mind, they did acquit on one of the most very serious charges. The government didn't take that chance. They decided to ask for a mistrial because I think they were afraid about how many of the jurors were looking to acquit. You know what? You've got to make these decisions on the fly. I had the choice as well. Initially, my gut feeling was to push the jury to a verdict. I'm glad I didn't. I'm sure the government will live with that for the rest of their lives. That's too bad.
You know, Jeffrey, you had another hard decision to make on short notice in the middle of the trial, and that was after the jailhouse tapes that would have helped your client were not allowed into evidence. You had a short time to decide with John Gotti Jr. whether or not he was going to take the stand and testify. You went behind closed doors with him.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I don't want to go through the painful discussions that we had back there, but I can tell you that it was one of the most excruciating 15 minutes of my life, knowing that if he made this move and decided to testify, it could impact on him and his family for the rest of their lives.
Did he want to testify?
At various times he did want to testify. Ultimately, we decided together that he would not, and obviously I'm comfortable with that decision now.
And Jeffrey, let me just say, well, Jeffrey, what about the story that came out about a juror's notes being tampered with and somebody putting page numbers and all of this according to them occurring in the jury room? Some might say that could give jurors concern about some sort of tampering or intimidation.
You know, I suppose, I think it was cleared up pretty quickly that, you know, it probably was just a mistake by the juror. It was never brought up again. I think it was really much ado about nothing in the end. You know, any hint of any impropriety with the jury from the time this case started until the end was always directed at the defense just because of the Gotti name. Keep in mind that I'm not the one that put on 7 killers who are all out amongst us right now, free, out on bail. I think there's 30 bodies among the 7. I'm not the one that put the witnesses on the stand that lied under oath. I'm just the one that got the truth out. So if the jury should have been concerned about anybody, it shouldn't have been us. It should have been
all these guys in witness protection? In other words, if they're sitting around waiting to be recalled by the state if this case gets retried, they might be a bit uncomfortable.
I find it hard to believe that the 7 killers would be concerned about John, who's never been accused of murder or conspiracy to murder in his life. I mean, keep that in mind, that you've given 7 killers free passes. Nobody spent more than a couple years in prison just to get John Gotti. Is it worth it? You know, why don't we go after Osama bin Laden and leave John Gotti, who's never been accused of anything much in his life, leave him alone already?
You know, Jeffrey, I was obsessed with the lawyering in this case because I thought it was so good. Your closing argument in particular, your cross-examinations in particular. But we got to step back from that and face the fact that if John Gotti Jr. is a free man, a lot of people are still going to be uncomfortable. What do you say to people who are concerned this guy's going to be out walking the streets? How do we know we're safe?
It's ludicrous. I mean, who is he alleged to have hurt?
Curtis Sliwa.
The Curtis Sliwa stuff is from 13 years ago. They had him in prison since 1999. They bugged the visiting room. They bugged the attorney's room for 14 months. They listened to every one of his conversations. Why didn't a single tape get played at trial? The government didn't want it because what was revealed during those secret buggings? I want nothing to do with these people.
But didn't John
I'm done.
know that he was
How
being
did he know he was
taped?
being bugged? I have a question. If he knew he was being bugged, why did the government continue to get extensions on the wiretap orders? They would have had to have found that he was talking about things that were actually inculpatory as opposed to exculpatory.
I want to get to the end of your closing argument because we didn't have cameras in the courtroom. You took a bold risk and looked each of the jurors in the eye. What did you say to them?
Well, it was the end of a 3-hour summation, and it was a very emotional summation, and I looked in each one of their eyes. I went up to each of the 12, one by one, and I was about 6 inches away from each of their noses, and I told them, I know that there are people in here that are disgusted by the lies they've heard that the government's put on. I know there are at least a few of you, 3, 4, 5, 6, that have reasonable doubt. I'm asking you right now, you're going to go in the back. You're going to be told to convict that it's a Gotti. Days are going to go on, and they're going to pressure you to convict, and they're going to pressure you to give up your vote. I'm asking you to hold on like grim death. Don't give up. Do not give up. Remember what I'm saying. Remember what I'm saying. Don't ever give up. And you know what? It worked, and it should have worked, because it was a disgrace, the liars they put on the stand, and we've been proven right.
And you got one, and we always say a defense attorney only has to get one. You got one on all of the important
charges. I like
charges.
12. But I'll take one.
Reaction in the courtroom today. There was some drama from the family members. What happened?
I believe one of the defendant's aunts, the other two defendants were convicted of certain charges. One actually was cleared of a double murder, but was still convicted of some charges, and the other one was convicted of securities fraud. His elderly aunt apparently fainted in the courtroom. She apparently was revived. She's all right.
Victoria Senior gasping, running out.
It's a very
Victoria
emotional thing.
Junior crying.
I have to tell you, this is the most emotional thing. I don't know that your viewers can understand. This is like having a baby from start to finish. It's incredibly emotional. Everybody is so emotionally invested in it. And I can tell you that when we learned yesterday that we had a deadlock, I had to wipe a tear from my eye. I mean, I believe in this guy. I know that people are thinking, oh, how could you defend somebody like this? You know what? The government goes after a John Gotti with 7 liars. What happens when they go after a regular citizen?
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Jeffrey Lichtman, impressive work in that courtroom. Catherine?
All right. Well, thank you both, Jeffrey. We certainly appreciate you joining us right after such a tough day and an amazing trial. Lisa Bloom, thank you as always.